Pinned on YouTube. I'll need your help and I'll explain why soon. And let's start our live stream. Well, in today's live stream, we're going to talk about how to burn visceral fat. Moacir. Is burning it important? I want to lose visceral fat for looks. I want to go to the beach. I want to have six-pack abs. But it's much more important because of your health. We're going to explain here how fat, especially visceral fat, is harmful to your health. But what you probably want to know from this conversation is, Moacir, why do I gain weight? Even when I eat very little. I've already been on a diet. I've done food restriction. I've tried those calorie cutting diets, right? Sometimes I saw results but regained the weight. Why do I keep gaining visceral fat even when I eat very little? And how do I get rid of it? I want to lose this belly pouch. I want to get rid of this beer belly. How do I do that? Is it only through diet? Do I really have to keep my mouth shut? Or is there another simpler way? Yes, there is. There's a much simpler process. We're going to talk about it here. Are exercises required or necessary? And do thermogenics work? I saw that there's a thermogenic that increases basal metabolism, that burns fat. Is it an option? We're going to talk about all of this in our live stream today. So stay with me. And before we begin our live stream, I need to ask you all for something. It's very important, okay? I'm participating in the iBest Award for Best Health Influencer. And of course, I need to count on you. I need your votes. So the link for you to vote for me is in my bio on Instagram. It's also in the comments on YouTube. I pinned it in the comment. It's in the video description. But if you don't know, I couldn't find the link. Moacir, what do? Go to the iBest Award, type in Moacir Rosa, and give me your vote, okay? You have to vote every day, okay, my friends? Each day you can give me one vote until June 13th. I know I can count on you. It would be really cool for us to be ranked among the top 20 health influencers and move on to the next round. And my audience, of course, will give me that vote. Don't forget to share this link, okay? Share it in your groups, share it with your friends. And remember, woke up in the morning, go there and give me a vote, okay? Well, I've already done my campaign. I've already asked for your vote. So let's get to our live stream, right? That's what matters. You're here for content. So let's go, my friends. I'll put it here in the comments so I can keep up with you. Great, I can see the comments here. Very good. First question, what is visceral fat? People think that visceral fat is under the skin. That belly, that beer belly, that's under the skin. Is that true? No, it's not. This visceral fat is especially problematic because it's a type of fat that's between the organs and often inside the organs. For example, fat in the liver or hepatic steatosis, you've likely already heard of this condition. The liver fills up with fat and then we have a fatty liver, which is especially bad for our health. It's not just the liver, okay? There's also fat between the intestines, right? Fat accumulates there, which is the visceral fat around the pancreas. So it's a condition that even though it seems like it's just an aesthetic problem, is actually quite serious. Visceral fat, this increase in visceral fat. Why is it so serious, Moacir? For several reasons, but the main one is because it changes our entire metabolism and increases our inflammation. So this visceral fat, for example, is full of an enzyme. And then every fat cell, the more fat we have, the more we have an enzyme known as aromatase. What does aromatase do? It takes testosterone and converts it into estrogen. And this is especially bad for us men because estrogen is a feminizing hormone. And then you notice the formation of those man boobs, right? Estrogen makes you gain even more weight. So look at this vicious cycle. You have excess fat, therefore you have more aromatase. That aromatase will convert your testosterone, which would help you build muscle and burn fat into estrogen, and then you gain more weight. So it's a cycle. The more fat you have, the more fat you tend to produce. That's why the fat cycle is so vicious. And that's exactly why we need to break it, and we're going to talk about that today. But it's not just about looks. The production of inflammatory mediators leads to a very high level of inflammation. That's the issue with visceral fat. So if you measure interleukin-6, if you measure tumor necrosis factor alpha in these people, you'll see that they're inflamed, right? High sensitivity C-reactive protein inflammatory markers in general. Even ferritin itself, this person is inflamed. No, but I'm inflamed and I don't feel anything. I don't have any symptoms. You actually have no symptoms and don't feel it. This inflammation, known as subclinical inflammation, is a term familiar to those who have followed me for a while. It's that inflammation that, even though it doesn't have symptoms, will cause all the chronic degenerative diseases that we know. So, for example, the formation of the atheroma, which is that plaque, right? In our heart arteries, that plaque that can cause a stroke in the future, that has an inflammatory background. It's the subclinical inflammation that causes that. The development of cancer. It's an inflammatory process. It's not an inflammatory process that takes days, but rather years, and that will lead to this terrible disease, which is cancer. And Alzheimer's has an inflammatory background, right? And all the diseases like arthritis, arthrosis, all these diseases have this inflammatory background. And having visceral fat out of the normal range, out of the parameter, you can know that you are highly inflamed. Just by looking at a person, I can tell if they are inflamed and if they have insulin resistance. And then comes the third problem with this visceral fat, which is insulin resistance. Insulin resistance means that you are eating excessively, probably carbohydrates, and probably refined carbohydrates. With that, you stimulate excessive insulin production. The receptor starts to deny this insulin because it's too much, because you're putting too much glucose into the cell. You're producing too much fat. You enter a state of insulin resistance. Your body asks for more and more insulin until your islets of Langerhans there in your pancreas collapse and you become diabetic, dependent on insulin. Then, my friend, it's all downhill from there. It's a one-way road. From the moment you become insulin-resistant diabetic, you tend to gain weight much faster because the insulin injections try to mimic the function of the pancreas. But it's not the same thing, right? So the diabetic ends up getting it wrong and ends up gaining even more weight. So it's a process. Do you see that it's a cycle? That it's a terrible cycle and a vicious cycle, right? Weight gain starts in a vicious cycle and will make you gain even more weight. You become insulin resistant, move towards diabetes, and you'll get there, and you become inflamed, right? Your aromatase is in excess, your testosterone drops because you're producing too much estrogen. So it's a very vicious cycle. That's exactly why we need to break this cycle. Moacir. But that's where the trick comes in, right? That's where the interesting part is, right? How do we break this cycle? How do we burn this fat? How do we reduce this visceral fat? It's easy to talk about it, but how do we actually make this process happen? Is it through reducing calories? Look, my friends, calories, they do have their importance, right? So the amount of calories that foods have does have its importance. If you consume too many calories, you will obviously gain weight. However, it's not the smartest way, it's not the fastest way, and it's not the most efficient way for you to burn that fat, visceral, because it's against human instincts. Cutting calories, so very few people can manage to do it. So just cut calories to burn fat through this strategy. Why? Because your body notices that it's losing. As you cut calories, first your body lowers its basal metabolism. This is a process that happens. Our body has a process known as homeostasis. This homeostasis, as you cut calories, works at first, but after about 3 weeks, your basal metabolism tends to drop. Okay? This is documented. I'll talk about an experiment that was done in just a bit. So your basal metabolism drops and you need to cut more and more calories to keep burning fat. So it's very difficult. Few people manage to do it and few people, although I see a lot on social media, a bunch of nutritionists who only talk about calories, right? You can even eat uranium, right? According to these nutritionists, even uranium is okay because uranium has no calories. I see a lot of famous nutritionists out there saying that you can drink as much diet soda as you want because it has no calories, right? That margarine has fewer calories than butter, so it's better. So they don't evaluate health, they only look at the calorie issue, and calories aren't even that important for a more effective fat loss strategy, which is what we're going to talk about here. Moacir, but where are you getting this from? Well, actually, several experiments have been done about this. Maybe the most famous experiment is the one by Dr. Ansel Keys, which was done right at the end of the Second World War. He actually did an experiment. He took men who didn't want to go to war, right? We were just wrapping up World War II, and there were still some conflicts in the Pacific. So these men who didn't want to go to war went into this experiment. And what was the experiment? These men were confined for months. They couldn't leave that environment. Nowadays, you couldn't even do an experiment like that anymore, right? But back then, you could. So they were confined and subjected to a diet of 1,600 calories. Look, 1,600 calories. I see diets out there with fewer calories than that, okay? But that's how this experiment was done. And what was observed over the months? The men lost weight. Of course, on a 1,600 calorie diet, they lost weight. However, they lost much less weight than expected. And another problem, they had terrible side effects, hair loss, weak and brittle nails, often reports of nails even falling off, night panic, food cravings. The person could only think about food. Of course, right? Confined with 1,600 calories. And the quality of the food, there were a lot of carbs. That's when things got complicated. Well, these men, after a few months, lost weight. Not as much as expected, but they did lose weight. So the experiment worked. No. Why? What happened? After these men left that confinement environment, left the experiment, what was observed? They quickly returned to their initial weight, meaning it only worked while they were confined because they had no other way out. But after they finished the experiment, they started gaining weight again. And even worse, many of them gained even more weight than at the beginning of the experiment, meaning they gained even more weight. Because they developed a compulsion for food, and none of them managed to stay thin in a sustainable way. In a sustainable way, right? What do we learn from this experiment? Calorie restriction might even work, but are you going to do that for the rest of your life? Probably not. Most of us can't. Okay, Moacir, but give me an option. What should I do, my friends? Basically, our whole body works through hormonal triggers. So many times, it's not even the amount of food we eat, but what we eat. What are we eating, first of all, and when are we eating? Why is this important? Let me give you an example, okay? You wake up in the morning, your insulin is really low, right? You've been fasting and slept. Let's imagine you slept for 8 hours, you were fasting, your insulin is low, you wake up in the morning. If you're one of those people who wakes up in the morning and makes some bread with margarine, has coffee with milk and 3 spoons of sugar, and that's your breakfast. Do you know what happens to your insulin? It spikes, which we call an insulin peak. What does insulin do? It's a hormone that gives the following order to your body. Take this truckload of sugar and turn it into fat, right? Store it as a reserve because I might need it later, since our body doesn't know that we have a huge supply of food. It still thinks we're in that primitive land where food was scarce. So every surplus needs to be turned into storage in the form of fat. Insulin is responsible for that. If, on the other hand, you wake up in the morning and make, for example, an omelet, okay, with scrambled eggs there and eat that, your insulin does this. It doesn't spike, it increases very little. Why? Because eggs don't have carbohydrates, and they don't have carbohydrates, especially refined ones, right? Like sugar, like foods made from flour. And these hormonal spikes are fundamental in the long run for those who want to lose fat. Why? If you release little insulin, you'll store less fat. In other words, you'll nourish yourself. Eggs, for example, are rich in protein, minerals, vitamins, choline, lutein, and zeaxanthin, which are important carotenoids even for the eyes. It's a rich, dense food. On the other hand, bread with margarine and coffee with milk and sugar have almost no nutrients at all. Bread is just starch, right? It's starch, it's flour, it's a form of sugar. Margarine isn't even real food. That's a Frankenstein that the industry invented. Coffee, okay, it has some antioxidants in it. Milk has a little bit of protein, even though it's an inflammatory protein. Sugar, don't even get me started. It only serves to make you gain weight. So, do you see? Many times, the choice of what you eat makes all the difference in your process, in your strategy. Moacir, it's very hard. You gave one example. Okay. To make it clear for you, you need to prioritize dense foods. Nutritious foods, which are dense foods, are what you buy at the butcher and at the market. That's dense food. That's real food. And what do you need to avoid? You know, when you go into the supermarket and there are those middle shelves, there are stuffed cookies, chips, packaged bread, those middle shelves, processed food, all kinds of snack bars. That's what you need to avoid. Usually, of course, it's not a rule, but usually the back of the supermarket, some supermarkets have it in the back, some have it at the front. In the United States, it's at the front. Here in Brazil, it's usually in the back. That's where the produce and butcher are. So in that area, you can have everything, the frozen foods there, frozen chicken, chicken breast, fish. You can have all of that. The vegetables, fruits, those are all allowed. If it's packaged in the supermarket, probably, again, of course there are exceptions, but it's probably a starch-based, flour-based food. You can check the label. It has in its formulation hydrogenated oil, which is extremely inflammatory, and it also has sodium chloride salt, which is a flavor enhancer and a bunch of junk, right? To give the worst example of supreme junk, which is stuffed cookies, right? Stuffed cookies are the kind of food that has nothing good in it. It only has inflammatory substances, right? It's hydrogenated oil mixed with wheat flour and a truckload of sugar and salt to enhance the flavor. Nutrients? Almost nothing. That's it, my friends. Many times, it's not the amount you eat, especially because when you eat these dense foods, when you eat meat, when you eat fish, when you eat avocado, when you eat vegetables, when you eat real food, you tend to feel fuller, right? You do. You don't feel like eating again in 3 hours. Compared to when you eat, for example, a bag of potato chips. You eat a bag of chips. I don't even know how many calories are in that. 300 calories, a bag of potato chips, right? Then you make a chicken fillet, some broccoli, some vegetables, right? It has the same 300 calories, right? Just as an example. But this steak, this real food, will keep you full for 4 or 5 hours. And that little bag of potato chips, in an hour, you'll want to eat again. Because it doesn't fill you up or provide nutrients. We eat to get nutrients, right? That's the purpose of eating. It's not because it's tasty or to make us happy. No, it's to get nutrients. We eat because we need amino acids, we need vitamins, we need minerals, we need phytonutrients. And there's none of that in a bag of potato chips. That's just hydrogenated oil with corn flour. Fried or baked, either way, it doesn't matter. It's junk all the same. So when you eat that stuff, that junk, after an hour, your body is going to turn around and say, hey, my friend, that magnesium I need, that potassium, that vitamin C, that protein, where is it? It never arrived. I just got French fries and needed nutrients. Then you go and eat some instant noodles, and you spend the day like that, right? Eating all the time. At the end of the day, you took in very few nutrients and a truckload of calories. That's when the calories really make a difference. And of course, you'll gain fat, obviously. You'll gain fat, right? Do you see, guys, that it seems kind of obvious, but when we talk about it, people sometimes think, yeah, I actually do that. Isn't that right? Who do you know that does this? Go ahead and comment below. Guys, if you're just joining, remember to vote for me at the iBest Awards. I'm counting on you. We're in the running. We need to be ranked among the top 20 to move on to the next stage, right? So the link is there. Look, on YouTube, it's in my bio. I'm counting on your vote, okay? Invite your friends and share the link with them and your groups. And you can vote every day. I'm counting on your vote, not just today. I'm counting on your vote every day. In the morning when you wake up, go there, vote for Moacir. I'm counting on you, okay? We need to qualify. Very well, my friends. We talked about what to eat. I think most people already have an idea about that, especially with the internet. That was helpful today. Information spreads more now. But what about the time to eat, right? And the time, well, the time, my friends, is the longer you wait between meals, the better, okay? The longer you wait between meals. Why? If you eat all the time, some nutritionists still believe in eating every 3 hours. I've never understood it, but okay. Let's go. Eating every 3 hours. What happens if you eat every 3 hours? You get insulin every 3 hours, causing a spike each time. Do you remember what insulin does? It's a hormone that gives the following order: store fat, store fat. So anyone who wants to reduce this visceral fat has to lower insulin. It's a battle against hormones, lower insulin. And then if you eat all the time, there's insulin all the time. So the more you give an interval between meals, the better. That's why intermittent fasting is such a good tool for this strategy. When we talk about intermittent fasting, a lot of people get their hair standing on end. Not me, because I don't have hair, so I don't have that problem. But a lot of people get their hair standing on end. Fasting is a strong word, right? Fasting, not eating, is a loss, right? But no. Actually, fasting is just an interval between meals. It's that period when you're not eating. The ideal strategy is to have a dense meal with real food so you can go as long as possible without eating. Why do that, Moacir? So your insulin goes down. When your insulin goes down, your glucagon goes up. Right? Glucagon is a hormone that stimulates fat burning, which is what we want. Your testosterone goes up. That's also what we want. And you have the action of other hormones that are important. You end up stimulating better function of leptin, which is a hormone that gives you that feeling of satiety, right? That sensation of fullness. At a steakhouse or all you can eat, when you feel full and can't eat more, that's leptin increasing, right? It's the satiety hormone. So controlling this leptin, adjusting this leptin is fundamental. And it helps control ghrelin. Ghrelin is the hormone that gives us appetite. You know that ravenous hunger? When you arrive with ravenous hunger, that's ghrelin taking effect. So we need to balance these hormones. Those who have this visceral fat are leptin resistant. Their ghrelin is completely unregulated. Insulin is high and glucagon is unregulated. Low testosterone too, since aromatase converts testosterone. Look at how messed up this person's metabolism is, right? Having excess fat is a mess. High insulin, glucagon barely works, leptin out of control, ghrelin out of control, low testosterone, low growth hormone, because excess insulin also lowers growth hormone, which is growth hormone, helps burn fat and even helps increase muscle mass. So it turns into a mess. It really turns into a mess. It's a strategy talking about nutrition, which is the first phase of our live stream here. It's a much smarter strategy. You regulate these hormones by eating the right food at the right time, giving the maximum interval. The interval between meals or fasting is something you get used to, okay? You wake up, sleep 8 hours, then have breakfast as soon as you wake up, wait about 2 hours, and do this for a week. Then after a week or 10 days, try skipping breakfast. Oh, but I can't skip breakfast. Try having dinner earlier, because then without you noticing, you'll be increasing the interval between meals. Soon you'll be fasting for 16 hours effortlessly without noticing. I fast for 16 hours daily and twice a week for 24 hours, right? Which is one meal. For example, I have dinner. I usually prefer dinner over lunch. I have dinner, and then I only have dinner again the next day. For me, it's natural, it's simple. Why? Because I'm already adapted, my hormones are already working, my leptin is already under control, my insulin is low. My insulin was less than 5. I took a test just now recently. So this helps in the process that I call hormonal realignment, which is the best strategy for losing weight. I know some nutritionists listen to and follow us here. Stop with that, guys. Stop with this calorie counting thing. Calorie counting is the worst strategy for the patient. They can't adapt. They end up eating a lot of unhealthy food because they're only looking at the calories. It's terrible. It's much simpler, much easier for the patient to do hormonal realignment. You should think in terms of hormones, not just calories. Of course, calories have their importance. If you stop consuming sugar but eat half a bottle of olive oil a day, it's healthy, but since it has calories, it will make you gain weight. Break your fast with real food, never processed or refined carbs. Someone asked how to break a fast. Always choose real food. Someone here already said, I can already do a 24-hour fast. I do it easily, very calmly. And the day I do a 24-hour fast is my best day. It's the day when I feel more energetic, more excited. Because when you fast, you produce ketone bodies, acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, which are like high-octane fuel for the brain. Only those who do it know. Only those who do it know, my friends. But our conversation today isn't about fasting. Then you might ask me, Moacir, but there are some thermogenics. I saw them on the internet, right? Thermogenics, there are thermogenics made from ginger, thermogenics made from green tea, made from caffeine. Does it work? Well, more or less, okay? You think you're going to take a substance that will increase your basal metabolism and just by itself, that's going to make you burn fat. Forget it. It's not going to work. However, it might be interesting. If you completed this first step that we talked about here, you are already eating a denser food. You are already eating a denser food and you are already leaving a long interval between meals. Then during these intervals, you can use some thermogenic substances. And then, yes, they can be allies in your weight loss process. I'll mention the main ones here. I, for example, really like green tea. So I make tea. I like to drink it cold. Okay, guys, there's green tea in here right now. I prefer my green tea concentrate. I cool down this green tea. Ice, I put a little bit like this in the bottle, fill it up with sparkling water, and add a little bit of sea salt. Okay? Just a pinch of sea salt. It tastes like soda. I drink it all day, so I prefer thermogenic drinks like this. Sometimes I add sliced ginger, and sometimes I use hibiscus, okay? Hibiscus tastes really good, guys, just like a soda. Really just like it, okay? You don't even need to add sweetener. It's so tasty. So this way you stay hydrated, which is another common mistake. People sometimes think they're hungry, but actually they're dehydrated. There are some questions, I'll answer them at the end, okay? Because otherwise we keep stopping too much here and it ends up, turning into a mess. It's because we're on two platforms, right? We're on Instagram, we're on YouTube too, so there are too many questions, right? I need to follow a line of reasoning, but I get lost. Please forgive me. If a really relevant question comes up, then I'll bring it up here. I'll post it on my Instagram. If you don't follow me there. I'll share the recipe. My hibiscus and green tea infusions, I'll demonstrate step by step how to make them. It's very cool. That's when thermogenics help. And those capsules, those pre-workouts, they can be interesting too, okay? I'm not against them. No, I'm not against them. No. Now, the most important thing is the review process of this dietary issue, right? Start eating dense foods and give a longer interval between meals. And then, yes, these thermogenics can help. I like it more. Some supplements, for example, chromium picolinate. Chromium picolinate is very interesting, especially for those who are diabetic, because chromium picolinate improves insulin sensitivity and with that reduces insulin resistance. Remember that insulin is that complicated hormone, the one that signals your body to store fat? Right, chromium picolinate helps. Berberine too. If you have diabetes, you should take berberine. It's very beneficial. Regarding thermogenics, here I want to highlight magnesium because magnesium is necessary to participate in the generation of adenosine triphosphate. Without magnesium, your energy and basal metabolism decrease, leading to more fat accumulation. Magnesium is therefore interesting. Coenzyme Q10 because it increases cellular respiration in the mitochondria. And vitamin D because vitamin D increases testosterone levels. It boosts the energy process. We're no longer getting sunlight, so everyone has low energy and low vitamin D, right? So I also find it quite interesting. You have to supplement. Look, coenzyme, magnesium, almost mandatory, vitamin D, omega-3. To name 4, look, you must find a way and use them. Very well, Moacir. And exercise? Now, yes, exercise is something I don't like. I don't like to exercise, but I need to do it. How does this work? Look, my friends, exercise for fat loss. I'm going to say something. Some may disagree, but I have to tell you the truth. For the purpose of losing fat, for that purpose, you won't get a very interesting result, okay? Why? Remember when I talked about homeostasis? Homeostasis is this process where the body ends up saving calories here because it spent too much over there. So, for example, you go and do an hour on the treadmill. Then you burn calories there. Let's imagine you burn 200 calories. Okay, great. But during the day, 2 things will happen. First, you will eat more even if you don't notice because your body will want to recover those calories. Second, you will become more inactive. Have you noticed that after we finish exercising, we relax and become more still? There, you end up saving the calories you burned during exercise. So, for a calorie deficit, exercise is practically useless. However, if you exercise to gain muscle mass, to increase muscle mass, then it will help you. Why? Because you will increase your lean mass. With this increase in lean mass, you need to increase your basal metabolism. The more lean mass you have, the higher your basal metabolism. And the higher your basal metabolism, the greater your calorie burn. So when you increase your muscle mass, you burn calories even while at rest, right? And it's much more interesting, much more efficient than killing yourself on the treadmill or going for a walk. Some say, I walk daily, but it doesn't help. So for a calorie deficit, it's useless. Forget it, okay? It's better than nothing, but it's useless for a calorie deficit. So, my friends, good, I'd like to help you burn that visceral fat. I see a lot of people at the gym doing crunches, right? It's much better for you to lift weights to increase your muscle mass, right? When you increase your muscle mass, you raise your basal metabolism, and with that, you increase your calorie expenditure, right? So it's a more interesting strategy, it's an easier strategy, it's a simpler strategy. It's just a question just came in, but not. So this exercise, this strength exercise, this exercise for muscle mass gain ends up being interesting. For this strategy, if you have a more long-term strategy to lose belly fat, right? Everyone wants six-pack abs these days, women, men, everyone. They want this strategy. Weight training, okay? Weight training is much more interesting. Oh, but does that mean it's forbidden to use the treadmill, bike, or do cardio? Not at all, right? It has its importance too. But for the purpose of burning fat, Even though the logic might seem otherwise, strength training is more interesting. Exactly because you increase muscle mass and you increase your basal metabolism, and with that, as I said, you burn calories even while at rest. Okay, this strategy is very interesting. All right, my friends, I'm going to leave this live stream on the channel, okay? If you're just joining on Instagram or arrived late to the live stream, it will be published on my YouTube, okay? It will stay there on my YouTube. It will be published there. You can watch, share, or do whatever you want, okay? It's very important that you share all our content. I make it with a lot of care for you. And don't forget, okay? For those who just arrived, I'm also taking part in eBest. The link is in my bio, okay? I'm participating. We have to stay in the top 20. I'm counting on your vote. You can vote every day. In fact, you should. You should vote every day. Remember me in the morning when you wake up and think of Moacir. Please give Moacir a vote. Details are in my bio and description. Just go to eBest and enter my name. If you lose the link, it's important for you to have it so you can share it with all your friends. I'm counting on you, okay? Yeah, running, good question. Let me see if I can find some questions here. A run at 14 kilometers per hour, 40 minutes. Look, every exercise, my friends, is great, okay? Except for walking, which is an exercise, all right? But every exercise really is great. I recommend it. Moacir, I like running. Do running. Moacir, I like biking. Do biking. Moacir, I like the gym. I think you have a problem, but go to the gym. I myself go to the gym, okay? Do I like it? I do it out of necessity, not enjoyment. I prefer Pilates. What matters is that you exercise, okay? Now, for burning fat, strength training is more effective. As I said, if you run at 14 kilometers per hour for 40 minutes, the tendency is that you'll eat more, even if you don't notice. Your body will want to recover those calories, okay? It will want to recover. And the tendency is, after the run, you'll feel more relaxed. You'll sit in front of the television. You move less, even if you don't notice, and you save those calories. So it all evens out. But for your health, it's great. Your heart thanks you. Your brain thanks you, right? Your inflammation goes down, you'll sleep better, you'll produce endorphins, you'll improve serotonin production, you'll improve dopamine production. It's all good. Any exercise, all right? Now, if you're over 50, like me, or over 40, pay special attention to strength exercises, okay? Because we start a process of sarcopenia from that age on, right? Of progressive loss of muscle mass. And this sarcopenic process needs to be fought. And that's why strength training is essential. That's why just running is often not enough, because you need to move, right? The upper body. I highly recommend creatine supplementation for anyone who's past that age, you know? Creatine helps with adenosine triphosphate recovery, phosphocreatine, right? It aids in adenosine triphosphate recovery, right? Adenosine triphosphate loses a phosphate, generates energy, becomes adenosine diphosphate, and it needs to be recovered. And then you have phosphocreatine coming into this process. So creatine is a supplement. One of the ergogenic aids, or the most studied ergogenic aid, is creatine. And now there are a lot of studies coming out about cognitive improvement, especially reasoning, mainly for women. Apparently, women benefit more from creatine supplementation, right? But strength training is essential. All right, guys, let me see if I have any other interesting questions here. How many meals a day? 16 hours? Well, it doesn't matter. About intermittent fasting, imagine you fasted for 16 hours and then had 6 hours to eat. That's not so important, okay? Whether you have 2 meals or 3, it's not that important. What's important is that within that eating window, you eat real food. And by that, I mean food that comes from the market and food that comes from the butcher. That's real food. That's much more important than how many meals you have. The best thing is to fast and eat real food. Bread with eggs. Can you have bread with eggs? Look, my friends, I'll confess something to you. I really like bread with eggs, okay? Personally, I really like bread with eggs. However, I hesitate a lot to eat bread, okay? A lot, really. Not just because bread isn't a very dense food, right? Bread is a food that's poor in nutrients. It's basically starch, right? Almost no vitamins, almost no protein, almost no minerals, very poor. But the problem is the gluten, right? Gluten is a highly inflammatory protein. It will worsen the leaky gut condition that all of us have to some degree, which is this intestinal permeability that increases the inflammatory process. Just like the casein from milk also has this property. So I avoid bread because of this excess gluten, okay? More because of the gluten issue than the lack of nutrients, even though it's very poor in nutrients. Okay, post-bariatric, good question. Post-bariatric, 12 years after surgery, gaining weight without eating too badly. Look, two things could be happening here, okay? You had bariatric surgery and claim to eat right, yet you're gaining weight. Probability one, what you call eating wrong, okay? Maybe that's the most likely probability. You're eating foods you think are healthy, but they're not. So, if you eat bread, if you eat a lot of sweet fruit, if you eat a lot of foods low in nutrients, tapioca, anything made with flour, so it could be that those bars, right? Those bars that are supposed to be healthy, that's just rice bran, right? With artificial substances, soda, juice, okay? Fruit juice has a ton of fructose, my friends, a ton of carbohydrates, and fructose is extremely hepatotoxic, okay? It's now the top cause of fatty liver disease. It's surpassing alcohol, okay? It's surpassing alcohol. So it could be that. Or it could be that you're eating healthy foods, but they're very high in calories, for example. You might be overdoing it with nuts. Nuts are a dense food. They're healthy. They have zinc, magnesium, and a lot of interesting nutrients, but they're very high in calories. Fatty foods are high in calories, with fat providing 9 calories per gram and sugar 4. So calories aren't the most important thing, but they do matter. You might be overdoing it with some oils, for example, coconut oil. I don't know if you use it. Olive oil. Olive oil is very high in calories, maybe. I love olive oil, okay, but it's very high in calories. So it could, some foods, even healthy ones, are often, avocado is very high in calories. There are people who eat 2 avocados. That's a lot of calories. So it's one of those two, right? You might think it's healthy when it's not, or you're eating healthy foods that are very high in calories. Usually fatty foods have this property. Okay, my friends, 2 important messages, all right? Don't forget to vote for me, okay? I'm being annoying asking for votes. The life of a politician can't be easy, but I need your vote there. It's for the iBest Award. I need to be among the top 20 there to move on to the next stage, and I can really count on you, right? There's no other way. The link for you to vote for me is in the bio, and it's also in the description in the YouTube video. This video is going to YouTube, okay? If you liked it, share it. Give it a little, like, it doesn't cost anything, right? A little, like, doesn't cost anything. Just like my vote there to vote for me, it takes 5 seconds, and you need to vote every day, okay? And to give a like here, it doesn't even take half a second, right? So I'm counting on you. I hope you enjoyed our conversation, our little chat. Every Saturday we'll be here talking with you, okay? A new video drops Monday and our podcast episodes are already out, okay? I think in about a week or two, the first episode will be out. Stay tuned. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure to subscribe, okay? Because very soon we'll have some really special guests to talk about health, okay? Stay tuned. My friends, thank you very much. I want to wish all the mothers here a happy Mother's Day, right? May it be a blessed Sunday, right? May you be able to spend it close to your children, and you, child, may you be able to spend it with your mother. If you no longer have your mother, she'll always be with you. You can be sure of that. So happy Mother's Day to all the moms. And a big hug, right? That hug. And I'll be waiting for you in our next conversation, everyone. See you then.